Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mental Health Moments. I'm Linda Golick, the Health and Wellbeing Consultant at Bellin Health, and I am joined by two extraordinary individuals today. We are so happy to have as a special guest Mohammed Bey. Mohammed is the Chief Officer for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at NWTC. So welcome, Mohammed.
Thank you very much for having me.
And as always, we have Charles LaTorre, who is our Bellin Health behavioral therapist. So hello, Charles. How are you today?
Very good. Good afternoon, Linda. Welcome, Mohammed.
Thank you, Charles.
So our Let's Savor Wellbeing topic for the month of April was celebrating our differences. So I posed the question to, do you notice that you are a little different, or do you notice the differences in other people? And today we really want to celebrate what we do find different in each other, and that's a discussion that we're looking forward to. So there are some ways that we can be aware and things that we can do to be more open to other people's differences, and I'm looking forward to Charles and Mohammed joining me in that conversation today. So Mohammed, I think I want to begin with you. So one of the tips that we often give is to welcome new ideas. So what does that look like for you in your role, and what are some of the things that you're involved in, and how do you see that play out?
Just to begin, doing diversity, equity, and inclusion, those are some loaded terms, and there's a lot that goes into it as an individual, but then also as an organization. I often bring in this word metathesiophobia, which is a fear of change. I think we as individuals can get comfortable, I wouldn't say complacent, but really comfortable in our setting and with routines. We are at times routine-driven types of individuals. And so when we talk about diversity, we are really looking at people, and people who may, we're talking about different learning styles, different skin tones, different ethnicities, different genders. And some ways to welcome that is to recognize, just even acknowledging that there is this difference within each and every one of us. And that as an individual, I love my routines, and sometimes I will kind of mix up a routine just to see how I react. Because again, in an organizational setting and in my own at the individual level, we often associate ourselves with individuals who are like-minded, and that's not wrong. But there are many ways that we can kind of practice this welcoming different ideas by mixing up our routines, by turning on a different news channel, by driving out, taking a different route to go home, test driving a different car that you never thought that you would want to test drive, the Lamborghini or the Ferrari or the pickup truck. Like stepping out of your comfort zone in many ways really helps to prepare your mind for this idea of welcoming new ideas.
I love that, Mohammed. I love the idea of just changing things, just intentionally doing things different. Charles, what would you like to add in terms of welcoming ideas and where we're starting our discussion today?
Well, I'd like to first, before I even add to it, I want to support, I love the things that I just heard of what Mohammed said, and to dovetail with it or blend in this idea that I know for me, when I'm expanding boundaries, it's usually with going from familiarity to unfamiliarity, right? And you use the word commonality. Commonality breeds comfort, right? We get comfort in routine. And I find any time that I'm uncomfortable, I'm looking at why. And is it because I'm out of my routine? You know, anytime we take a life detour or a literal one, driving somewhere, we get the detour in life, literally, and the ones figuratively. What are we going to do with them? Every time we get a curveball thrown at us in life, I think you have the option to, one, take it with a grain of salt, two, get wigged out by it, or thirdly, hit it out of the park. And I think what Mohammed was just describing, and this is why I want to underscore it, is when you know when you're in a pattern or groove and when you're open to changing it, that awareness in and of itself is monumental. It's the key to being able to see things through a different lens than the one you're seeing it. Without that awareness and then the openness from there, all bets kind of are off, right, at that point. So I think that is absolutely great. For me, the openness comes to trying things that I don't think I like. I don't think I like Brussels sprouts, so I don't eat Brussels sprouts. I don't think I like this, or I don't think I like that. In fact, even some of the research in this area is looking at when you expand your comfort zone of food from an ethnic standpoint, you are expanding your perception of diversity. So trying new things, even when they don't think that it is in your favorite area, I think to me is expansion. And I am trying to lean in more than ever towards those things, trying more of what I don't like rather than sticking with what I do like. And that's been my way of forging even more into the expansion mindset.
Go ahead, Mohammed.
So I'm loving it. And I so want to jump in with this book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And it's the way that our mind works. And there are two types of approaches. My God.
I think you would mean this one, right?
That's correct. Yes.
I'm going to love talking with you, Mohammed. Please keep going.
So I have to, for those that haven't read that book, our minds operate like in just two types, fast and slow. And so this thinking one type of approach, you're hiking on a trail, you see a snake, your brain automatically has the associations to know that that's danger. If you're swimming in the ocean, that's, your mind is already, in a sense, pre-programmed at a fast rate to make a determination, to provide you information. So if I say A through Z as adults, we know that there are other letters in between A through Z. But as a child, we are teaching them A, B, C, D, E, F, G, so they understand the whole entire alphabet. That's kind of a thinking slow. I call thinking, how the brain thinks in the thinking two type of phase. It's more or less playing chess. And in that thinking two type of phase, it takes a lot of time and energy and glucose, and your brain does not like that. It really wants to have everything fast tracked, quick associations, doesn't use a lot of energy, and that is the way we get comfortable in thinking and reacting to our environments. And so I recognize that, and I tell my kids this and my family that to do something different does take a lot of energy at times, but how do you build excitement around that difference? How do you celebrate it? How do you acknowledge it? How do you also at the same time recognize the feelings that you have and the way your mind is processing that type of an engagement and environment? It's kind of what I wanted to add.
Yeah, thank you for that. So to kind of continue in that vein, I know Charles always brings us really good information as far as neuroscience and what's going on in our brains and why we do the things that we do too. So Charles, do you have additional information that you want to share on that?
Sure. Yeah, there's so many great things. And what Mohammed just started tapping into, for any of you not familiar with Daniel Kahneman and the book Thinking Fast and Slow, is basically a seminal writer on this topic. So important to the neuroscientific world and kind of the foundation. And I think kind of even what Mohammed was blending into is this idea that he dedicated most of his life to understanding errors, systematic errors in our thinking and what happens with them. And He does all these different studies on why we have these automatic reactions to certain things. And he calls them biases or cognitive errors, right? And diving into a little bit more of this, this was so instrumental that he won a Nobel Prize in economics, first non-economist to win a Nobel Prize in economics, because it helped people understand. He basically is what ignited the whole field of behavioral economics, why we do certain things that we do, and how we can be so sure that what we're thinking is accurate. That in this fast system thinking that Mohammed was talking about is wonderful. Life for us, we needed to be simple. If we needed to learn again how to tie our shoes every day, and it didn't just get there and we have it, we'd have a very difficult life. Few of us would make it out of first grade. But we get these learnings, these experiences that kind of sink in and lead us to know what we know, even when we don't know exactly how we learned it. None of us have this specific point in time where we learn that a picture is on our wall and that's what it means. But we accumulate all this information together, and it gives us this heuristic quality scientifically, internally, that we live our life about and on, because we need to be efficient to get through day in and day out experiences. So he describes system 2, the part of us that has to think more, and this is his word for it, quote unquote, lazy. It defers to system 1 all the time. And it's a beautiful thing, but it's flawed. And the flaw is, if I ask you the question that Steve is a meek and tidy soul, he loves order and neatness and wears glasses, is Steve more likely to be a librarian or a farmer? And amazingly enough, most people's answer to that, and you can think this to yourselves, most people think librarian, because we get this mental image of who Steve is. And despite the fact that he's 20 times more likely to be a farmer, if you just go by statistics. But our natural inclination and our lives are full of these things, one after another. The whole book essentially is filled with studies of these cognitive errors or flaws that we live our life around, and sometimes don't even know that what we're doing can be flawed. And we are convinced that it's right. So I'll end with this part with this comment. We don't believe things necessarily because they're true. We believe them because we believe them. And that's what it comes down to, because it's what's been internalized with us from a neuroscientific level. There's a lot more. I know there's another section we're going to talk more about the science, but I'll pause now rather than going into more of that, and we'll keep going. So I'll turn it back to you, Linda.
Fascinating stuff, Charles. Thanks for sharing that. So it sounds like this is a book I need to pick up, since the two of you have read this. So when we tie it then back to celebrating our differences, since we're now aware that our brain is doing this stuff and it's making assumptions that aren't necessarily correct, we need to ask ourselves, how can we change that in ourselves, right? And one of the things that we talk about is treating others how they prefer to be treated. So not necessarily how I myself want to be treated, but really figuring out how someone else would like to be treated. So Mohammed, where do we start with that? How do we find out?
You know, that can be a tough avenue for some to take, because I am Christian. I was born into a Muslim family, and I currently practice Catholicism. And there's a golden rule. And individuals are brought up with various principles, such as the golden rule that that was relevant to that point in time. But as we progress as a society, people have taken this concept of equity, which how we define it as an organization is meeting every single individual where they are, not necessarily pushing my perception onto them, what I believe their needs are, but meeting them where they are and understanding what their needs are, and then applying things accordingly. So it's a whole mindset shift. So again, I go back to individuals recognizing that within themselves, and then asking for examples, asking people for help. You know, how do I get out of one mindset and get into the mindset of meeting each individual that comes across my path as that individual? It's just something that takes practice. It's something that pushes people out of the boundary to understand what difference is, to understand the people that are within their communities, within their organizations.
Charles, what would you like to add to that?
Well, I love what he was saying so much. I just want to kind of double click and underscore on a couple of those things that was so great. The one in particular, the way I like to look at it is, you know, I love that golden rule. I've kind of looked at it from a vantage point of the platinum rule. The golden rule, treat others as you would like to be treated. I think the platinum rule is treat others as they would want to be treated. When we could get out of ourselves and in the shoes of others, I think we're even stronger in that mindset. So to me, the keys to this, and it's what I love where Mohammed is going, is if we don't start with some awareness of what we are naturally gravitating to or not, we're not in that frame of mind. But to start there, I think we have to have not only that awareness, but then the intent. So to me, the intent is, what am I going to do if I intentionally want to open myself to this direction? So to me, it comes down to curiosity. Am I curious enough to want to know more about you than me? I want to know more. I want to understand. I want to know. I want to be curious. And I want to know something more than I know. If I want to expand my beliefs, I can't just stick to them, right? So commonality reinforces beliefs. Expansion leads us to growth. So if I see knowing more than what I know, rather than just stick to what I believe, if I'm going in that direction, I'm learning, I'm growing, hopefully getting better, and hopefully helping someone else get better too. So there's the curiosity after awareness, the openness, and then the ability to be grounded. Like, you know what? I'm not threatened by someone else's beliefs or way of thinking about something. I'm open to it and I'm grounded that it's not a threat, it's an opportunity. And when I see my interactions that way, and I'm saying literally me, but I mean, hopefully most people, when we see our interactions that way, we are moving rather than standing still, both with regard to our own growth in our interactions, and also even hopefully in the growth of the world becoming even maybe a little bit better place.
So I do have a question from our audience, and I think this is a really good question. So it says, I love asking an individual what they need and clarifying questions to help understand. How do I respond when the individual is irritated with me for not knowing and asking questions of them? So any feedback on that question? Mohammed, do you want to start?
Yeah, sometimes that does happen, and I would say not to get discouraged, but to emphasize to the individual who's responding that way, just to put it out there. I'm really trying to gain an understanding or get an understanding of where you're coming from and what your needs are, which is why I am asking the question. I definitely hear what you're saying about coming in prepared to a conversation, but I'm an individual that has room for growth. And so if you can meet me at this point in time right now, and if you can help me understand, um, we'll help the situation move forward. But there will be more positives and more folks that will feel a sense of belonging from you asking them than there will be the latter. And that's just based on my experience.
Yeah, great. Charles, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly so I look at that as, anytime we're attempting to connect, we're taking a risk, right? Anytime we're attempting to understand and share, we're taking a risk, and we don't know where it's going to go, but we're better off for taking that chance than not, right? So Emma Sapala, a great psychologist, talks about even in our day-to-day world, we could be walking down the street, say hi to somebody, and they may not say hi back. They might totally blow us off, not even respond. And do we then shut down, or do we take it even more of an opportunity to say hi, and maybe the next time we'll get something back? There's no guarantee how someone's going to react and respond to anything that we initiate. But I do know, and I totally agree with Mohammed on this, that when we are going in that direction, and I look at it as this way: whenever I'm finding out something I didn't know through a question, I am moving to a better place. And the very question that this person is posing, to know that you at least moved in that direction and was a catalyst, even though it wasn't received, the next time around, it may come back to you several fold. So don't give up, but keep trying, and we're moving the needle in the right direction every time we do that. And I guess the only other thing I would say is, if for some reason it persists, it might be the tone, maybe something you could look at. But in general, if our heart's in the right place and we're generally curious, more often than not, just as Mohammed said, more often than not, that's going to eventually go to a good place.
Agreed. Beautiful. Thank you for that. So I love that idea of moving to a better place. So as we look to celebrate our differences, we really do want to look at ourselves and just kind of commit to that continuous improvement. So how do we get there? How do we make that commitment to ourselves, to our organizations, to our teams? What can that look like? And I think I would like our audience to also just kind of understand a little bit more. I think we've kind of wrapped around it a little bit, but kind of that in implicit bias that all of us have. And I think it would help us to understand that better. So Mohammed, can you speak to that a little bit and help us kind of get on the path here to how we commit to some improvement?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also want to give kudos to Charles. You explained Daniel's book quite well, much better than I did. So I greatly appreciate that. And I'm just glad that we are on the same page and are seeing some of the ways that individuals can continue to push themselves. So implicit bias really ties back into what Charles was explaining earlier related to Daniel's book. And just within the way that our minds see our environment and just ourselves, we get so ingrained in our routines and our brain. From a development standpoint, when we are younger, we're exploring, we're sticking our fingers into electrical sockets. That's a joke. But kids are out there exploring the world. And as we get older, our brains tends to cut off pathways between within areas that are no longer needed. So it begins this neural pruning. So again, there's this fast association with processing the environment. So as Charles was alluding to with the farmer and the librarian example, that's our brains really processing stuff at a fast rate and making an association. And then we as individuals will act on that association. So with implicit bias, it's very unconscious, and we have to recognize it. It shows itself in the world of diversity by some of the comments that we may say to someone, whether it's about their food, it can be about a smell or about their look, their nose, features, or whatever it is. And we have to continuously recognize what's happening with the words that we use, the feelings that we have inside. To combat implicit bias goes back to exposing yourself to books, exposing yourself to situations that are not familiar with you. And what happens when you have also good associations is that your brain then makes a new connection. So if you had someone walking down the street who may look a certain way and you say hello to them and they didn't say hello to you back, now your brain sometimes is keeping tabs of that. So the next time you come across the street, someone who may look the same, you may not want to engage them. Well, my suggestion is start every situation anew. Everything's anew. Start fresh. Treat every encounter as if it's the first encounter. Leave all the baggage behind. Leave what's happening in your head, long as it's not a dangerous situation, behind, and start anew. And that is one way you can help to combat implicit bias and begin to also dive deeper into what's happening within yourself.
Love that. Love that. Starting anew. Charles, what would you like to add to that?
Well, this is where I was going to chime in a little bit more on the science part of it and how it ties into what Mohammed was just explaining so nicely. There's this dynamic where emphasizing the system one, system two. The system one, when you really think about it, is essentially strengthened neurological patterns, right? And some of them are not just strengthened over time, they're tuned over time, like a guitar or piano tuned to certain things, or a radio station tuned to a certain frequency. Or even in your car, you're always having something tuned to the same thing. So implicit bias in some ways can have this tuning that is all that you have learned, an accumulation of things that you have learned that led you to think a certain way about certain things. So I'll ask people on the call, who do you like more, the Chicago Bears or the Green Bay Packers? And I'm going to assume with some confidence that we'd have predominantly the Packers, right? Katy Perry or Lady Gaga? Patrick Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers? Whenever you have an answer to this, think of this. Have you ever been at a sporting event? And I've been at many of them. And I've seen this scenario. A call is made, and half of the place loves the call. The other half of the place can't stand the call. And when we don't like the call, we got to review it, challenge it, do this, do that, figure it out, get it right. I've been to many sporting events that I've even seen people asked to leave because of how forcefully they challenge this. We challenge it because what we think is right is what we are most, we never challenge something that strongly if it was the other team that the call was for. It's like, oh no, let's just move on. But if it's against us, we got to do all of this. So my point is this: as we develop over time, and I don't mean only our generation, but generations that it's passed on from, that our brain evolved for safety's sake, survival's sake. And as a result, somewhere, somehow, it's always on the lookout for assessing friend or foe. Who's on my team? Who's not on my team? Who's with me? Who's not with me? Who's a threat to me? Who isn't a threat to me? And over time, we got to experience in our own mind's eye, even if it wasn't literally, but through what we watched on TV, what we learned in school, what we learned from our parents, what we learned from significant influences, all of those things get in there and create this sense for you, a heuristic of what's safe and what isn't, what's threat and what isn't. And it's a way of survival that our neurological process has been involved in for centuries and centuries over time. So, and has been finely tuned to. So how do we break that? It's not easy, but it starts with Mohammed, what he was saying. So if any of you are old enough to remember this old toy that a lot of us got for Christmas, it was a little red rectangle with two dials on it and a gray screen, and it was called an Etch-a-Sketch. And whatever was carved in there through those dials, whenever you were done with it, you could just shake it and you had a clear screen. If we could do that every day, that would be great. But our autopilot of life likes to keep most of those. So I look at it as, what are those patterns in your life making your life great? Because that's going to be 95 to 98% of them. We don't need to change everything. We want to keep most of that system one. We just want to be insightful and aware enough of what of system one isn't working, and that we could make system two strengthen over a period of time, so that now becomes our automatic autopilot system one processing. And it takes a little bit of work. It's not an overnight process to go from system two to system one, but we can do it. But it takes curiosity, investment, openness, and a willing to change, and a desire to be a little bit better today than we were yesterday, which I hope is what everyone on this call wants to do. So I'll pause there, Linda.
Beautiful. Thank you, Charles. And I think I kind of equate it to, when we're looking to make a changes, it's a lot like when we're trying to get in shape. And maybe, we're going to start running, and that first half a mile, your body's going, whoa, what is this? Because you're doing something new, and it's something your muscles aren't used to. So when we're trying to make changes, we have to understand that we are forging those new pathways, and we are doing something different. So we have to remain consistent and keep working at it. And that's really important. And that kind of leads me to our next segment. And I do want to invite our audience, if you have questions for Charles or Mohammed, please pop those into the chat. We definitely want to take your questions and what you want to talk about. Please let us know. But I want to lead into the communicating and educating piece. So how do we work to have better communication, to understand each other? How do we work to educate ourselves and those around us? So what are the resources out there? Where can we start? And Mohammed, I'll start with you.
There are so many ways to begin this journey, and my recommendation is to not go about it alone. So some of you on this call are probably coworkers, friends. Some of you might be associated with book clubs. Some of you may just remember when we were younger, we had this whole buddy system when you would go to the pool, the YMCA. Get a buddy in this and start with a book, start with an article. Of the Thinking Fast and Slow book that Charles referenced and I referenced. Blind Spots is another book. Hidden Biases of Good People. That's a great read as well. I wouldn't try to take on the world. I would start small. You could also visit some of the museums out in Washington, D.C. There are museums in Milwaukee. I took a trip to Northern Africa, Ireland, and Spain by myself. Did some backpacking and experienced different cultures that were welcoming to me and many cultures that weren't welcome to me. But I did a full-fledged immersion with the support of my family by myself. And that was nerve-wracking. And I don't always recommend that, but that's what I needed. To not be able to communicate in the same language and to learn how to communicate, to understand the different perspectives of racism, of prejudice, to understand the historical context of different environments and areas that I was in was very eye-opening to me. But I'm on a different journey. So figure out where you're comfortable beginning and start there. Again, I highly recommend finding someone who can be your buddy, if it's a group or an individual, and just pick up a book, an article. You can head over to the YWCA, to Casa Alba. Our county is littered, Brown County is littered with opportunities and festivals that are also open for individuals to attend post-COVID.
All right, great ideas, Mohammed. And pick something, right? Pick something that you can start with. Commit today to an action step. And then Charles, I guess if you want to add on to that, but I also would like to know, how will this ultimately enhance our mental health? How will these things really make us better from an emotional health standpoint?
I think in three ways. I think I'll add a couple things, but just the mental health part, why I think we need to do it. I spend my days right here in my office, many sessions, sometimes all day, or at least most of the day, with someone who feels that they've been slighted some way, left out, left off a team, left out of a group. Anytime we have that, when I see people, the hurt they feel from feeling they're on the outside looking in, that they have this hurt that I'm not part of. Anytime we're making someone feel, without even knowing it, not welcome or not their best, we're helping people feel better just by overcoming that they are part of something and they are involved with us and we're involved with them. We're making mental health and life in general better. And as I've said before, and I'll say it again, without our mental health, we don't have well-being. So if this is something adversely affecting our mental health, it's affecting our well-being, and we all owe it to each other for that to be better. In terms of how to do that, part of me thinks it's not just awareness and openness, but an acceptance that it's part of us. I know so many people who say, well, I'm not really that. I don't really have that. I don't think I do that. And to see it as I do or I don't, rather than it's a neurological piece of us with all of us on some level. So I'll give you one example. A study was done looking at how many female orchestra musicians were moved from the opening audition to future auditions for an orchestra, right? And once it was seen as so low, the comment was then understood and made that maybe we got to look at this. So if I asked any of you, do you think female orchestra players, musicians, are any less skilled and talented than males? Most of us would probably say, no, they're probably equal. But when they were trying out for these positions, the men greatly outperformed, at least in the way it was viewed, because they got moved on and the women didn't. But when it was switched to blind auditions, it was 50-50, right? So it was like they didn't know if it was a male or a female. Now, no one would go in and say, okay, let's get rid of all the females, but it's there. These things are there. They're there all the time. It isn't to fight it and say, no, I don't have that. It's to find out where it is and what it might be, and then dedicating some opportunity for yourself to learn and grow from it rather than deny it. So the one other thing I want to say in this, and maybe one way to conceive of it, the study that I just provided was from a book called Biased by Jennifer Eberhardt. And there's another researcher and presenter writer that I really like. Her name is Julia Galef, Galef, and she has a book called Scout. And it's about a mindset, which is you're either a soldier mindset or scout mindset. The soldier mindset is all about the neurology that Mohammed and I have been talking about, where it's tuned for threat, tuned to protect, tuned to defeat whatever is the threat, right? And a soldier has to do that, right? It's essential. There's also this scout. The scout is looking ahead, trying to be objective. understand the terrain, understand the mapping, getting the most accurate, consistent, beneficial information, searching for accuracy, searching for the best. And these two have to be part of a team, right? And that's the way we are. We have this neurological part of it, us, that is always trying to survive, but hopefully we have this part of us that is wanting the best and most accurate information and the willingness to seek it out. And when we could be in that scout mindset of finding out accuracy, not yearning to prove ourselves right, but more open to finding out what we might know that will make us better. That's the scout mindset. And when we're in that, we are in a better place, and so are the people we're with.
Beautiful. Thank you, Charles. Well, we just have a couple minutes left, so if you have any other questions, please put those in the chat. But just to kind of wrap us up here, it is National Minority Health Awareness Month, so we just want to remind everybody to definitely be having conversations, with your healthcare providers, letting them know your background, letting them know any special health conditions that you have. We definitely want to be aware of that and continue to take the best care of ourselves. But with that, I also want to get closing comments from Charles and Mohammed. You two have been an absolute treasure today. I'm so sad that we're running out of time because I feel like there's so much more we could talk about. But any parting thoughts that you want to share with us as we wrap up today? And Mohammed, I'll start with you.
Keep moving forward. Keep experiencing life. It is beautiful. Don't let the fear of change get in your way and be your roadblock to your own success and the success of your community. We are beautiful people. Our minds, we are here for each other. And my advice is to keep that in mind. And all in the end will be well. And thank you for this opportunity today.
Thank you, Mohammed. That's so great that you were with us today. I'll just say a couple things. And one is that I really hope that this was helpful today and important for people to listen to, and hopefully even something that will be a catalyst to do something with this. And the reason I think it's so important is this diversity is so great, but it's on the verge of being threatened. And if any of you are familiar with this book called The Code Breaker by Walter Isaacson, in the biogenetic world that we are living in, we may not be that far away from diversity being lessened, that we now have the genetic technology to be able to, and by the way, this book is great. So this is a support to it, not a critique, but it's unbelievably great. But there is this thing now where we may have this ability, if we even call it that, that we can change gene sequencing and engineer the children that we want in the future. So to me, everything we're talking about today, and maybe an important way to look at it, is part of how we experience diversity and people in our lives is coming up on this thing of not only for us, but what kind of lives do we want to leave for our children? I think it all starts with looking at that and then taking to the point of our viewpoint, because everything we talked about today is mindset. And I love this quote by Michelangelo, which is, I saw an angel in the stone and sought to set it free. I carved to set it free. Know the lens that you're looking at things from, embrace it, and because at the end of the day, the world that we have is going to take all of us to walk step in step in it, and hopefully even hand in hand as we go forward. So thank you, Mohammed, for joining us today, and I'll turn it over to you, Linda, to wrap up.
Well, thank you to the both of you. I just think that was an incredibly just wonderful, full of great information session. And I really appreciate the passion and the knowledge that both of you brought to this session. I think it was just beautiful. So thank you for taking the time and being with us today and giving us so much great information. So we'll be sending out this recording. If you everyone to please share this with your teams, with your leaders, with your family members. Just great information to continue to pass on. And thanks to all of you for joining us today, and have a great rest of the day.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.